And before I went on the break, I did mention that we'll be having Professor Swart to touch a bit on that decision by the International Court of Justice. They basically said that the legal conditions, for holding sanctions against Germany went met and ruled against to the request of 15-1. This was a case brought forward by Nicaragua. And to chat to us a bit about the implications of the case and just to give us, a short analysis of it is visiting professor at Wits Law School, specializing in human rights, international relations, and international law, Professor Swart. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on Salam Media and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah. Professor, first and foremost, before we analyze, for someone that doesn't know specifically what this case was all about, if you can just summarize it, why did Nicaragua bring Germany in front of the ICJ and present that case in front of the International Court?
Well, Germany is actually Israel's second largest supplier of arms after the United States. And Nicaragua felt that there's a good case to be made that this means that Germany is complicit in the genocide occurring in Gaza. And this is why they brought the case, asking the court to rule that Germany should, on an urgent basis, cease to provide any arms to Israel, which I thought was a reasonable request, but right from the beginning, international lawyers specializing in this field were skeptical that the ICJ, which is essentially a very careful conservative court, would rule in favor of Germany, because it would mean that the court would have to take quite a progressive stance on the law, because there isn't much precedent for this kind of step to take provisional measures. However, the court, if I can just correct you on one point, the court didn't throw the case out. It didn't throw the case out. The court just ordered that provisional measures will not be ordered, but the case in its substance on the merits is going to go forward. So this is going to be interesting, because this means that over possibly a question of years, we will see a case playing out where Germany would have to defend its position of providing a significant amount of aid. As part of the arguments before the ICJ, Germany said that it's now, since this year, providing significantly less aid. But we saw that in 2023, there was still something like 326 million euros provided of arms sales provided to Israel. So, this is still an enormous amount. And, it just doesn't make sense that these arms, these weapons were not involved in the killing of Gazans, as Germany is claiming. Germany is claiming that many of the arms were so-called defensive arms. But it just doesn't make sense that this wasn't used in Gaza.
And I wanted to touch a bit, on the ICJ itself, because a lot has been said about, their powers and their ruling, especially when it ruled different rulings, especially when it came to Palestine. I think for the longest time, a lot of people were not paying much attention to the ICJ and so some of the work that it does. This specific ruling, what does it tell us about the scope and limitations of the ICJ's power in international disputes concerning humanitarian aid and military support?
Well, one would hope that the mere fact that Nicaragua brought the case in itself was really inconvenient or more than inconvenient, in some small sense, even shameful to Germany, and that it would have an impact on Germany's behavior going forward, that they would now revise their policies and significantly reduce arms exports. It's just that, yes, that is the one aspect of this. The other aspect is that it did show again what I firmly believe about the ICJ, which is that it's a very conservative court. So the ruling in favor of South Africa in January, where we saw the court ordering provisional measures asked for by South Africa against Israel was actually, in some sense, quite surprising and extraordinary that the court immediately said, yes, South Africa's right, there's a plausible case of genocide. So I think in this case, the ICJ has again just showed its true colors that it's not going to push the law. It's not going to say, okay, we believe that there must be a connection between thousands of Gazans dying and all this aid provided by Germany. And I think the court was possibly overly impressed by the very technical arguments made by Germany, because Germany's case before the ICJ was highly technical. It avoided many of the real humanitarian issues, and I think that's a real problem.
And on the decision itself, the ICJ ruled 5-1 against Nicaragua's request to halt German military aid to Israel and to renew funding to UNRWA. Could you elaborate on the legal grounds or conditions that the court found were not met in this case?
Sure. So one of the things the court emphasized was that the case was underprepared and that Nicaragua, wasn't clear on the facts, that they made factual errors. But it's also true that Germany only changed some of its behavior very recently, almost as if, it was just changing its behavior to show to the court, look, we're not culpable, but that it wasn't really authentic. And my concern is really that Germany, in its rhetoric before the court, didn't sound more humane and sympathetic, right? But was just sort of all dry and technical about it.
And looking at Nicaragua now, where to from here? Because, this case looks like one that, could be followed up. As you mentioned, correcting me there, that it was not struck off the roll. Is there any recourse measures? Is there anything more that, Nicaragua can do in furthering this case and, ultimately seeing its sway in their favor?
Well, I'd say in terms of the provisional measures leg of the case, that ship has sailed now. But I'd say in terms of the merits, which is probably only going to start much later in the year, if even this year, because we know the ICJ's role is getting very full, with many countries approaching the ICJ now. I think they need to prepare much better. They will have to make sure that their case is sort of, much more watertight, and they would have to, really describe which weapons have been exported, how those weapons were used, so as to anticipate Germany's argument that it's not the exact weapons that they are exporting that's killing women and children. I still think they have a strong case. I mean, those weapons are not falling out of the sky, and people are not dying without having been attacked. So there is a strong causal connection. And yes, I mean, they could beef up their legal team. That I think is probably also a good idea. And then to also just I would attack Germany's highly legalistic position, because there is something about the German attitude in the court that, is just not showing enough compassion and humanity.
And maybe those weapons do fall from the sky because the rockets are
exactly
directly into Palestinians. Yeah, but then I want us to touch a bit on the Geneva Convention reference, because as I was watching the proceedings, the court reminded all of the parties of their obligations under the Geneva Convention. Can you discuss the importance of this reminder and, what it means for the parties involved in this case, particularly, we're seeing what's happening in Gaza right now, and, the role and involvement of the different countries. Are Geneva Conventions, still a law that we can, still, look into, and countries can be held accountable, for breaching the conventions?
Absolutely. The Geneva Conventions have been very widely ratified. Parts of the Geneva Conventions have become customary international law, which means that it's absolutely universally applicable, and it still forms the foundation of humanitarian law. And part of that means that the targeting of civilians is absolutely prohibited. And we know that this war is 90%, about the targeting of ordinary civilians. And I think that that is also not being taken seriously enough by Germany, which to me indicates that Germany somehow has bought into this idea that, oh, it's necessary for Israel to attack Hamas, that it's attacking Hamas. But if one looks at the facts on the ground, it's the ordinary people that have suffered by far the brunt of this. So I think that Germany has actually lost its way in terms of understanding the ethos and the original intention and ethos of the Geneva Conventions.
No, I think we're going to leave it there, Professor. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and I'm sure we'll chat with you, as these cases unfold, and we take a look at the ICJ and its role being so prominent in recent time to the public, rather. But I think we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much. There you have it there, Professor Mir Swart. She's the visiting professor at Wits Law School, specializing in human rights, international relations, and international law. Just giving us a rundown of that decision by the ICJ, which favored Germany when it comes to them supplying, weapons and military aid to the state of Israel, weapons that are being used to murder, kill, and commit genocide in Gaza. We're going to take a quick break. We'll see you after this.